aloha, and welcome to all our friends in Facebook land. Aloha and welcome to today's Creative Lab Hawaii panel in honor of AAPI month. I'm Georgia Skinner, Chief Officer for the Creative Industries Division for the state of Hawaii. And we founded Creative Lab Hawaii to empower creatives with a focus on talent development, business acumen in media and music industries, which is wonderfully led by two great entrepreneurs themselves, Charles Brotman for our music programs and Michael Palmieri for our media programs. So just wanted to give them a shout out. Thank you. Today, it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator and Hawaii-born actor, Kimmy Valmolero. She's an amazing person and glad to say that she is a colleague. She's a dynamic actor, but entrepreneur and founder also of Improv Hawaii, and is best known for her role as medical examiner, Dr. Noelani Kuna on Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum PI. But it doesn't end there, you know. Her Broadway credits include the original Broadway cast of Mamma Mia, her second touring, she was in the second national touring company of Miss Saigon. So, you know, we're talking credibility to the max and screens. She continues to inspire and mentor local talent while launching creative ventures like Tiny Stage Hawaii, where she's broadcasting from today, a small but mighty creative space in Chicago. Kimmy's latest venture is actorshigh.com. Go check out a website designed to empower Hawaii-based actors by providing them with the essential tools needed to start their careers. Does she have any spare time, one would ask? Well, of course she does. And in that spare time, she just loves to stare at her husband's face. But he's on a break right now, so we get her for a little while. Please, friend and moderator today, Kimmy Valmolero. Take it away.
Hey everyone, happy May Day and happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much, Georgia. Now, in a moment, I will introduce our rock star group of panelists, but I wanted to share a little bit with you about our webinar today. So our conversation today with our panelists will last approximately 75 minutes and will be followed by a 10 to 15 minute section for questions from our viewers. That's you. Please feel free to write your questions as the program unfolds. We will choose questions from the queue when we start that portion of the program and answer as many of those questions as our time allows. So get those fingers ready, get those brains working. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we want to ask. So let's introduce our panelists. First up, we have the amazing Amy Hill. Aloha, Amy. Now, Amy, Aloha. You probably recognize from everything. Her television and film credits number over 170. That's a lot of stuff. Many remember her from her memorable turns in 50 First Dates or Ice Cube's neighbor in Next Friday. Google that clip. You're going to want to watch that if you haven't seen it. She's currently a regular on Magnum PI, starring as Kumu. Having started her career in theater, working with the famed Asian American Theater Company in San Francisco, she continued with LA's East West Players. She's also known in the theater world as a respected performance artist, having written and performed a number of one-woman shows. Welcome, Amy. Hello.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amy's BFF, Chris Lee. Hawaii boy, he is a motion picture and television producer, the first Asian American president of production at a Hollywood studio, Columbia TriStar Pictures to be exact, and the founder and director of the University of Hawaii Academy for Creative Media System. At TriStar, Chris oversaw such Academy Award-winning films as, you may have heard of them, Jerry Maguire, Philadelphia, and As Good as It Gets. He's also worked on numerous other hits as My Best Friend's Wedding, Legends of the Fall, The Fisher King, The Mask of Zorro, Godzilla, Star Troopers, and The Patriot. Mr. Lee has also produced Valkyrie, Superman Returns, SWAT, Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, Ballistic, White Frog, and How to Win at Checkers Every Time, which was developed at Creative Lab Hawaii. He's a graduate of Okalani and Yale University and started his career in entertainment with ABC's Good Morning America 7. Welcome, Chris. Hello. All right, next up we have Susan Soon-Hee Stanton. She is a writer-producer for Succession on HBO and has won a WGA and Peabody Award. She also writes for Modern Love on Amazon, The Baby on HBO, Dead Ringers also on Amazon, and Conversation with Friends, BBC Hulu series. Her plays include We the Invisibles, Today is My Birthday, Takarazuka, The Underneath, Solstice Party, Singness, Moana Jr. for Disney Theatrical Productions or Group, Navigator, and much, much more. Now, these are plays that have been shown at theaters like Kumukuhua Theater, Kumukuhua Theater, and Honolulu Theater for Youth. In film, she has received a feature film development grant from the Sloan Foundation. Her film Dress won the Audience Award at the Hawaii International Film Festival. She also holds a BFA from NYU Tish's Dramatic Writing Program and an MFA Yale School of Drama. Welcome, Susan. Hello.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, yeah. All right, next up we have someone I've known for a really long time before he was born. We have Chris Kikani Okalani Bright. He is a screenwriter born and raised here in Hawaii. Now, after attending Kamehameha schools for 13 years, Chris went on to study film and music at Chapman University. He worked in production at Walt Disney Animation Studios from 2014 to 2017 and has been writing several film projects since. They include Conviction, which made it to the 2018 Blacklist and has sold to Warner Brothers. And now Aloha Rodeo, a new Disney live action film. Welcome, Chris. Aloha.
Aloha.
Next up, we have another Chris. Ooh, that's a popular name today. Chris Mckinney, a novelist and screenwriter born in Honolulu and grew up in Kahalepuna on the island of Oahu. Yeah. He is the author of 6 novels, The Tattoo, The Queen of Tears, Bolo Head Row. I got to say that in a pidgin accent. You can't not do that. Mililani Malka, Boy No Good, and Yakudoshi, Age of Calamity. His 7th novel, Midnight Water City, will be released by Soho Press and distributed by Random House this year, July 2021. Welcome, Chris. Hello. Tai Sanga is a native Hawaiian filmmaker who was born with passion for storytelling. Yes, I feel that. His film Stone screened at the Sundance Film Festival and is distributed by the, I forgot to ask about this one, Criterion Collection. Did I say that correct, Tai? Yay, thumbs up. His short film, Ha'e Hawaii, a moving film about the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy, has garnered multiple awards and screened at festivals around the world. He also directs, I love this show, Family Ingredients, a food travel show hosted by native Hawaiian chef Ed Kenny. It was nominated for 2 Daytime Emmys and got one in 2014. This show is currently in production for its 3rd season. Welcome, Tai. Hello. And now, last but not least, we have Lele'ae Buffy Kahalepuna Wang. Hello. She is a local actor and singer, playwright, artist, and is a multiple HSTC Po'okela recipient for her works in the community theaters here in Hawaii. Her most recent credits include Lovey Lee, The Conversation of Ka'ahumanu, and, can you help me out with this one, Buffy? I want to make sure I say it correctly. We'll all learn something. A'auia, Holding On at UH Manoa. She recently made her debut on the small screen in Magnum PI and will soon be seen in Kumukuhua Theater's next production, the Untitled TMT Project, written by fellow panelist Susan Soon-Hee Stanton. Yay! Hi, everybody. I got to take a sip of water. Y'all got some credits up in here. You know what I'm saying? Ooh.
All of us.
So there's a lot to talk about and a lot to cover. And, I think one thing that I've learned with everything that's coming up is just asking questions and learning and getting that education when we don't know someone's background or can't pronounce a word. So I've written a bunch of questions down. I know you folks have also submitted some, but I want to actually start off with our actors, and Amy, I want to throw it to you first. So you, Amy, have been a part of this community, and I have my notes because I'll get excited and I'll just go off. But Amy, you've been in this business for a very long time and on all platforms. I mean, from the small stage with a one-woman show to bigger ensembles, and then of course with network television and also in film. Usually AAPI actors are lumped together as Asians. Do you have any advice on how to kind of introduce individual cultures as unique, and how can we help the masses to be a little bit more receptive to all of that? Oh, I can't hear you, Amy.
The muting and unmuting is going to kill me.
I know, it's okay,
So,
you're good.
yeah. Chris, I need your help. You got to tell me. He's my stage manager. Mute yourself. Unmute. Anyway, I started out in theater in San Francisco at the Asian American Theater Company, basically at the inception, and all we did was new works based on experiences from our community. Mm-hmm. So because we were telling stories about the Filipino community and the Chinese American community and the Korean American community, we didn't have a lot of newer immigrants, but we did a ton of camp plays, but we were already exploring our communities, and we were telling the stories, from our own perspectives. So they were written by us. So if there were characters in there that had accents, or they were funny, or they were, I was also in a sketch comedy group that did, sketch comedy about our communities too. So, that's basically where I started doing most of my Filipino accents and my Chinese and my, because our community embraced and accepted that. And I thought we were creating honest, true, authentic characters and stories. I brought that to things that I was doing outside of that community. And sometimes I got pushed back. Like I remember touring to Asian American studies classes, and they were like, well, people are going to laugh. People are laughing at us. And I'm like, these are honest stories.
Yeah.
And if people are laughing, maybe that's a way to open it up so that we can sneak in with the real mind-blowing experience. So they'll walk away changed in some way. So for me, comedy is as equally powerful as drama. Sometimes drama is too easy for an audience.
Yeah, we all know how to feel drama. We can make someone cry and maybe scare someone, but it's hard to make someone laugh, right? It's interesting that you mentioned like accents. I think some people say, oh, you can't do that accent because, like you said, maybe people will laugh, but accents are real, and accents, it's a very, depending on how you present it and maybe kind of do it or how it's written. But I think accents are a part of it, and it shouldn't be totally ignored. Now,
these were stories that were coming from our community. So it was like, I was doing my mom, and so they were real.
So Buffy, for you, I've been a fan of yours for a really long time. As a local actor with extensive community theater experience, you've recently, like you said, your first small screen credit, and when I first moved back home, I just saw so many talented folks at Kumu and all of these smaller community theaters. What can we do as a community to kind of bridge that gap between getting those local community actors onto these bigger shows? Is there some support that's needed?
I think so. I think there needs to be some more encouragement. I think because, as speaking from a Kanaka Maoli's point of view, we feel like we don't have a lot of opportunities. Like we feel like we're only stuck in this one little box that we're not allowed to come out of. But I think with more encouragement and seeing others like us, the representation out there, I think that's what helped me ultimately come out of what I'm used to, out of my little box. And I was like, well, I'm not a film actor,
but you say that actor. Why? Yeah. What was that moment? Because I hear that a lot of local actors says, I'm not a film actor, because I think we have this image of Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts. And again, it's about representation. So what was that moment for you that you were like, yo, how about me? You know what I'm saying?
I think it was, I remember having this conversation with my mom. This was probably the beginnings of the shutdown of the pandemic. And, the only thing we could really do at home is just watch TV, watch movies, and that's kind of my family's pastime, is to do, watch a lot of movies, old and new. And, I'm watching these people who I admire, that I idolize. Like I'm a huge fan of the greats and like present day, like Viola Davis and Meryl Streep and, all these beautiful, beautiful actors. And I remember just sitting there and saying, I wish I could do that. I so wish I could do that. My mom was like, well, why can't you? I was like, well, I don't know. We'll go out and go get an agent, go do something, go, because we're here to support you, and I sat on it for a while and I said, you know what, my mom's right. Like I'm not going to be able to do that just sitting at home doing nothing. So I looked around and I asked around and if anybody was taking any new actors, from any agencies was taking new actors.
Yeah.
And eventually I was lucky enough to have somebody reach out to me and say, hey, I heard, I've seen you before, you're really, really good. Do you want to be in Magnum PI? And I was like,
oh. Yo, that's usually not how it works, but that's great.
That's not usually how it works. And she's like, okay, well, contact, so-and-so and, they can get you an agent. So I did. And
love that.
Yeah. So
I love that. So it was your mom. It's just somebody in our lives. I think that's what we need to do. And that's what I want to focus on today too, is what can we do now? Right. And also, Amy, as an actor who's been in this business for a long time, we've had this conversation before. And I think a lot of times you've seen this all the time. We're offered roles that make us uncomfortable, that are not necessarily fighting the good fight. And I remember you telling me that you didn't want to be a housekeeper, So what can we do, or what advice would you give to a novice actor? I don't want to say young because we can start at any time. A novice actor what advice would you give to them to kind of feel more empowered to turn down these roles?
Well, I've been a housekeeper.
Right, but you don't want to be one no more.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If there's something that's now, and at this point in my career, I feel as though I don't know how I can find any kind of challenge in that, especially if it's coming from, a white writer that maybe, in their mind.
So there's a difference, right?
There's a difference. I mean, housekeeper is not a bad job.
Right. No.
Although my mother would always think that
hard one.
I actually was a housekeeper, so when I became a judge in something, she'd be like, oh my God. Like I'd actually gone to law school.
Though. You make a good point.
Yeah.
It depends on how it's written. So it's not necessarily the job or the occupation, but it's how it's written, right? So
Viola Davis was a housekeeper.
That's true. Good point.
And I think she got an Academy Award, didn't she? So, so was Octavia Spencer, played a housekeeper.
What about these roles though that you say are written by someone that only sees it in this one lens? Is there advice that you would give to a young actor, or is it?
I would say, if you feel as though there's a way for you to approach this role. I mean, I try to approach things the same way I would in theater. That if I can make this a full-bodied human being, I will be happy to do it. But if I already see or sense that they are looking for a sight gag or some kind of, goofball, and there's nothing in it that even resonates that this might be a human being, then I just say no.
Yeah.
Because you can also tell that they're not going to work with you. If you read the rest of the script and it's a good script, and this one character is maybe not so full and rich, which happens all the time, because they're focused on other things, but you can feel in the script that the people who are putting this project together are willing to listen. And sometimes I've actually told my agent, if the producers are willing to talk to me, I'm happy to do it if they offer me something.
Yeah. But, and I think just
there are things.
Just standing up for yourself, not standing up for yourself, but asking questions. We're so afraid to ask questions,
We can. And it's not a bad thing. You have, even with Magnum, some things don't really fly for me, but I never just go and say, I can't say this. I will go in with an option. I will say, how about if I do this instead? Or if I, so you got to go in with something for them because they don't want to work any harder.
I love that. And again, I
Necessarily.
think as novice actors, we are scared to ask questions. And especially when we're dealing with culture and maybe something that we might know more about. I think it's maybe
Right.
just like a sigh of relief for them to be like, thank you.
Yeah.
You know? So
Most
yeah, I
people
love
are,
that.
I mean, I would say most people are open to that.
Yes. Yeah. I think
It took a
especially
long time
now.
for me to know that.
Yeah. And it's good. That's why it's good for us to hear that now. Yes, to empower ourselves
Yes.
now, right? Now, Chris Lee,
Mhm.
sir, you see how the sausage is made, and you've been, I can't even say it, sausage is made, how the sausage is made. And you've been in this business as well for a very long time when we weren't seeing people like you in these rooms, in these boardrooms, at these meetings. So how important is it for you to see a diverse boardroom or writer's room? And do you see a shift now?
Absolutely. But I just want to back up and say hello to everybody in the panel, because except for Buffy, I feel a very strong connection to each of them. You know, Amy and I did our first movie together, which was Wang's Dim Sum, A Little Bit of Heart, which was one of the first Asian American independent films that was made and was a precursor to Joy Luck Club in a lot of ways. Ty was always one of our very best students, early students. He's an amazing filmmaker. Chris, I've read his script, Chris Bright's scripts, and I can't wait to see them come to fruition. I actually read Aloha Rodeo before it was even sent to you, and I really wanted to try to make it, but you were a much better element, and I really think it landed in the right place. Susan is someone I met through David Henry Wang, the playwright, who I went to Yale with, and I had seen a show called Succession, and there was a scene with two Asian guys, two gay guys. One's like a big venture capitalist, and I just wrote on my Twitter. I said, "Oh my God, they actually gave the Asian gay guy another Asian boyfriend instead of a white guy." It was Jake Choi, who's gone on to great fame in other shows and stuff like that. And David wrote to me and he said, "Oh, that's Susan Sanson. She's from Hawaii." So she's since done some master classes for us, and we're really grateful. And she's a great writer. And Chris Mckinney, when I came home, I think there were really two things that locally sort of infused my vision for building the Academy for Creative Media. One was going out to Waianae to see Writer Productions and seeing what they were doing 20 years ago. And the other was that my stepmother gave me a copy of this book and said, "You have to read this book." And it was called Tattoo. And I read it and I said, this has to be a movie. This is really a fantastic example of telling a local story by a local person with tremendous reality. And I know Angie had it for a long time to try to produce it into a film. And I still hope someday it becomes a film. And I will say that that book has influenced more of the local films that our students have made than any other book on the planet. When I first got here, all anybody wanted to talk about was Quentin Tarantino. But then they all read the Tattoo and they all wanted it to be Chris Mckinney. So it's a great tapestry of folks. And, you know, I can go even farther back to Chris Bright's grandfather, because I was a stage performer with Ron Bright at Ala Moana and, you know, at the Blaze.
Me too, we're Bright kids.
Yeah, we were. Actually, Scott Rogers was on stage with me at the
oh my gosh.
Wizard of Oz. But I did a lot of shows with his grandfather. And I have always looked at Castle and the legacy that he has brought. You know, one thing I'm always trying to do with the school is get them to build sort of what I tend to call a fame school. And I hope that Windward picks that up because of the connection to Castle and the theater that they have there, because we developed so much incredible talent in this island. And a lot of it does have to go to the mainland in order to succeed and get to the larger, wider audience. It's not always true. But, you know, obviously, you know, you can put together a long list of performers at all levels who have found incredible success on the global stage, and they have all grown up here. So I think next to Korea, I think we are the fountainhead for Asian talent in Asian Pacific American talent in the world. So yeah, I think that things have changed. I was the first Asian American and actually the first minority to be president of production of a studio. And even in all of my time at Columbia and TriStar, I was the only minority executive ever in those rooms. There was never another one. There might have been one or two Black people in marketing possibly, but in terms of the creative ranks, no, they didn't exist. And
what was your timeline from just like where you started, like how many years and how many, things that you have to go through to get to that point? Because that's a high level position.
Well, I started in television at Good Morning America in New York after I graduated from college. And then I left that to go work for Wang as assistant director and ultimately as apprentice editor on Dim Sum. And that's where I met Amy. I actually cast Mark Dacascos in that movie. He was 18 years old. Joan Chen was 18 years old. She stayed with me. She was in the movie. There was a lot of talent that was in that film. Or even behind the camera, like Dennis Dunn was my PA, and I think Dennis Dunn is one of the greatest unsung Asian American actors. If you've seen Big Trouble in Little China or Last Dragon or his John Carpenter films, I'm desperate to see him back on screen. But that was a good example of working in something that was really community-based filmmaking. And it came out of because Amy, you remember all the auditions that we had, and all the actors basically came from the Asian American Theater Company because there was nobody else to pull from, right?
Yeah.
And they were and some were untrained, and they were up against terrific actors like Amy, and I think they held their own to a certain extent, but they didn't turn that into a career the way Amy then took off and became ubiquitous. So. It did start over 35 years ago, I guess, because it was second film. The first film was Chance Missing. And that was the first Asian American film to break through on the indie circuit. And then, from there, I became a script reader for TriStar Pictures. And then I was assistant story editor and then director of creative affairs, and then a vice president, a senior vice president, executive vice president, and then president of production. So, it was a journey.
That's a lot. Yeah, that is a journey.
It was a journey more. I think I worked for 8 different regimes during that time. And I think they gave me the job because everybody else had already had it at that point.
Did you feel like back then, especially that your race kind of held you, that you had to work harder, or were you just was that not even on your radar?
No, it's on my radar, but I think it was on a radar in a very different way. And there weren't a lot of Asian American executives. And actually, myself, along with a gentleman named Fritz Friedman and a woman named Wenda Fong, formed this thing called the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. And there were 3 of us, and we just decided one day that, we really need an organization that recognized the creators. It wasn't necessarily about the actors, because that's generally who we were saluting for the most part and had the most visibility, but we really were interested in the executives, the writers, the producers, and building that network to bring people to the forefront. And CAPE now is, thousands of members and has fantastic fellowships both for writers and for executives. And it really is looked upon by the studios and the networks as a place where they know they can secure talent, which, by the way, I will tell you, all the producers I've ever talked to have always told me that if someone comes from ACM, they know it's a good housekeeping seal of approval, and they know they're well prepared. They're going to be fantastic for the crew or whatever job they take. So I'm really proud of having started that too. So it's a continuum, but obviously when you can look back over 30 years, you can see how far we've come from when we're, Amy and I are making this little film with Wang, and nobody else was doing that. And of course, and then there were these big gaps. And, one of the gaps was to Joy Luck Club. And I'll just tell you one story as an executive. Joy Luck Club was something that Wayne was going to direct. It was from a fantastic script by a gentleman named Ron Bass, who had written Rain Man and other films. It was from a huge bestseller. And Janet Yang was the producer, and we had met on Dim Sum as well. And, I was a huge advocate for it inside TriStar. And if you don't know anything about the process, what happens is when you really like something on the weekends, you have this thing called weekend read, where all the executives have to read what everybody else likes. And then on Monday morning, you have this big meeting and everybody has to go around the table and supposedly honestly say what they think of the material.
Supposedly.
Right? And then because you're trying to push the rock up the hill and get it made and everything like that. And I remember one executive said that they liked the script, but there weren't any Americans in it. And I said, they are Americans, they just don't look like you. So, those are the kinds of things that would happen to me on a relatively often basis in those rooms. Yeah. And you kind of have to just kind of go with it and try to pursue whatever your goal is. Ultimately, the film got made by Disney and it did extremely well, but then it was another huge gap until Crazy Rich Asians. And the same thing for the show that Amy was in, the Margaret Cho show.
Yeah.
Long time. until we had FOB, right? So the good news is, I will tell you right now, I think Hawaii is birthing probably one of the most fantastic, inclusive, and legitimate shows I've ever seen, and that's the Dugi Kamealoha reboot with just Jason Scott Lee as the father. This kid named Matthew Sato from Mililani plays one of the sons.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of people in the show that I think everybody, that they haven't announced yet, but I think it's going to make everybody very happy. But it's great to see a show that's just about a family in Hawaii dealing with everyday family problems, and happens to have at its center this girl who happens to be a 16-year-old brilliant doctor. So,
and it's a great example that we can see, because it's a reboot essentially, or it's a remake of the show, but
created by
we can
Courtney
see
Kang,
it.
who was born here, right?
Yeah, and so we can see these stories in different ways, and why not?
Exactly.
And also talking about these rooms and why diversity matters. Not only Courtney Kang and Melvin Marr, all these folks that are behind Dugi Kamealoha, but also they went even to as far as to hire locally for the heads of wardrobe and hair. I mean, I remember seeing a photo, and the lead, Peyton Elizabeth, had like a Hawaiian, those bar
and you know why?
Jewelry.
Because Michael Fong, who's a longtime IA customer, was promoted to be costume designer.
Yeah, and that makes a difference.
With his colleague Shannon, and I forget her last name. I apologize, but they're longtime local folks, and it absolutely makes a huge difference in how they're presenting. And because of that, when they made their presentations to the producers back in Hollywood, they included on their boards all of these local designers that none of the LA candidates knew about. So that's where representation matters. And that also is where, again, I have just, I don't know about your Twitter feed, but there isn't I can't even say a day. There isn't like half a day that goes by where there isn't an announcement of some project like Chris Bright's project or something,
Yes.
So, and now we've got, and I know some people are whining about it already, but NCIS Hawaii is coming because they haven't announced their full cast yet. And I think everybody should just simmer down until they introduce everybody. But, the entire cast they have announced are people of color. It's also the first time a woman is leading that most valuable franchise that CBS has.
Yeah.
And it's a Filipino woman, right?
Yes.
There you go. So
listen, when I read that news, I got it from you actually, from my feed. I literally punched my fist up in the air, and I was like, I could have ran to any store, just like, I own the world. I don't know. I had this weird energy in me because, like you said, representation matters. It's such a big deal, Now I want to, and I love that, Chris Lee. Thank you so much for starting off fanning everybody, because that's so wonderful. And it's just so great to see. I love this community. Now, Chris Bright, I want to throw it to you because, you are, well, I guess I consider you still a young person because I've known you for so long, but you're quite experienced and coming up in this world quickly and rightfully so. Now, how do you think your script writing, or I guess script writing in general, what role can film play in breaking down certain prejudices?
I'm going to do what Chris did. I'm just going to say hello to everybody. And I'm fans of all of you guys, literally every single one of you. And I would love to reach out to everybody after this. Because honestly, there's several projects I want to do with all you guys.
Ooh, I love this.
But to answer your question, that's a really tough one to answer. But, I think I was just talking about with my wife in the car today. I think there's a special role that film specifically can play, because I don't know if musicals, Broadway, they can definitely get close, but there's something about film that gets you into the emotional perspective of someone that's better than any other art form that I know. And it's just because you can see them. You have the power of the close-up. You can, the actors are right there. And so I don't know if there's another art form that does as good of a job as putting you into the shoes of someone else. And I know I've watched certain movies where I've come in with a preconceived notion of oh yeah, I don't even know what it is, but just I think of one thing as being something. And then I watch the movie and it completely changes my perspective simply because I lived in the shoes of that character for however long. And I think, today we're seeing lots of different stuff from all different sides. And I think one of the best ways to potentially kind of break that down is to make stories told by people who are living from within those communities, not from the outside in, but rather from the inside out, and being able to, just tell, not even being heavy-handed about it necessarily, but just showing their story, just telling their perspective. And I really do think that I can break down barriers. And I know that because it's done that for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think too, I understand that maybe someone who is not part of a certain culture may be inspired by a story or history, but it's important for them to and start the conversation with somebody who knows maybe a little bit more about that, or like Amy says, be open to notes. Let's be open to notes. How about that? That's a good general note for everyone. Let's just be open to notes. Do you feel, Chris, that now people are approaching you as a Hawaiian screenwriter, creative for more stories?
Yes. I think since the Aloha Rodeo announcement, been getting a lot of different Hawaii stories. There's a tremendous appetite to tell Hawaiian stories right now, all across Hollywood. I'm seeing, at least, in the TV world, in the streaming world, in film, all across everywhere, all kinds too. Like some of the projects that Christy was talking about. It's really all over the place. So getting to hear that is fantastic, and I know it's usually for several reasons. One, because people want to come to Hawaii to shoot, and that's just the reality of it. But I think also because there's so many people are starting to realize there's so many stories to tell, and a lot of incredible voices to be able to tell those stories, like Ty. And I've never met you, Ty, but I'm a fan from afar. I just have to say,
I love this. It's just a room of love. Just a room. We're gonna do an autograph session later. We're all gonna sign each other's fan books. It's gonna be great. So Ty, actually, I'll throw it to you too. Chris Lee kind of talked about folks from Hawaii moving to the mainland to get their education and then move back. And it's changing now, especially with the program that Chris has done at UH. You left Hawaii to get your master's and then came here. Were there any challenges that you faced coming back to start your film career?
Not really. I actually wanted to piggyback on all of that, saying I love everyone here in this panel. And you guys
let's just all stare at each other for the next and just give googly eyes.
But for me, because my goal was to make it in LA, to build a career in Hollywood, and I had a bunch of those meetings, especially when I got into Sundance. We got access into like a lot of the creative labs, but like I just had projects back home in Hawaii. Like there was a demand to from different, either from the institutions or Heather Juni had a wonderful project called Family Ingredients, and it was the stories that I wanted to tell, and I decided I'd rather just stick roots back here in Hawaii and kind of fine tune myself as an artist. A lot of the things that like a lot of the stories that I want to tell specifically about Hawaii is important to be part of the community, I believe. The thing that what makes us unique is that as local folks from Hawaii is that we have access to a community and history that most of the world, the United States, has not like gone through. So diverse communities that have like histories of stuff that have been through everything. There was racism, there was all these fights, there were all these unions. And so to be here and to be immersed in all of that, it just allowed me to find my voice as a filmmaker. Coming from film school, like I was like, all right, I'm gonna like direct this big feature film, and I'm gonna make it into the career. Make my career is gonna happen after that. And when I decided to take the jobs here in Hawaii, at first I was like, man, am I stepping back? Like, is this the wrong way to do it? And like when my first project I did for Kumu Schools, which was a documentary for Uncle Pinky Thompson, Nainoa Thompson's father, I was immediately like, this is exactly where I needed to be.
It felt right, huh?
My journey needed to go. And it opened doors from there. And and thankfully I've able to say that I've just, from the past 10 years, I've just been making movies here in Hawaii, and doing it, I think, successfully, in the sense that I've been able to raise my family that way, so I'm just very, very grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, and how lucky, that people do return. I mean, we have such a connection to our families here and to our culture, our cultures, that it's really wonderful that we have such a fantastic lineup of or community of storytellers that are coming home to give voices, empower those folks that may have felt like they haven't had an opportunity, in the past. So I just love hearing that. And again, I love the fanning. Yes, Ty.
I was gonna say, and I'm willing to write a story or a series about a housekeeper, because my families are all housekeepers. All my aunties and uncles have worked in the industry.
Let's do it.
And there's so much depth and
let's do it. I'm
there that have not
making
been explored.
myself part of this. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, let's go.
They're fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's great. But again, like you said, we're in. Amy and I are in. Yeah. But yeah, and again, going back to what Amy said, there's a difference. Who's telling the story and what story are we telling? Is this a one-sided character, or what are the moments? Like you said, you got inspired just by that, because there's a lot of history moments for everyone, for every character. Now, Chris Mckinney, I want to talk to you about your lineup of stuff. You're from Kahalu. And so how important, or I guess, what advice would you give to storytellers who have grown up maybe in smaller parts, or not well-known parts of Hawaii? When most people think about Hawaii, they think Waikiki, they think the fancy hotels, so you've written a lot of stories that have showcased, smaller moments, really local moments. So what is your advice, or what journey did you take to kind of get yourself there?
I'll say my first novel, The Tattoo, was largely semi-autobiographical. So I would say to people from those smaller communities that authenticity is probably the most important thing. You also have to know what you're doing. I mean, really, when it comes to writing, it's not as if I can't write, but I want to tell this story. No, you have to learn to write too. So that's an important
that's good. Yeah. Or contact anyone here, right?
Yeah. It's like Ty, like, for example, Ty is a director. I mean, he has to know how to direct, how to use camera equipment, right? You need that sort of basic foundation. I would say one kind of maybe something that sounds a little bit strange is also knowing to step away and knowing that when you are out of touch with that particular setting. I grew up in Kahalu. True. I haven't lived in Kahalu for 30 years. You know what I'm saying? So it's sort of like, that's not, and this is sort of when I learned that I was out of touch. So, I did this small budget indie movie a couple of years back, and I wrote it, I set it in Kahalu, and I was in charge of the boats. So I take this, it's actually my dad's old flat bottom boat, and Kaneohe Bay has a lot of reefs, and we were shooting a lot of stuff out in the water. And as a kid, I could navigate to open ocean easily. Like it wasn't a problem. Now you flash forward a couple of decades or 2.5 decades, and I'm struggling with it. And it was at that moment, and we're in the middle of shooting this movie that I wrote. It dawned on me, I should not be telling this story anymore. This is not, when I was in my early 20s, sure, that's everything's still fresh. But once I do think that you have to have the self-awareness to know when you have lost touch.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice.
Yeah. And you can't, it's sort of like this notion that, it's sort of like you write this story, maybe you're writing a story that's based sort of loosely on your childhood. I would say be careful, because places change too. So just because the place that you're from may have changed, it might be. So it's sort of like, I think about the example that I would bring up is Minari, the movie, the movie that was a great movie, nominated for Best Picture and all of that. He was smart to set it in the 1980s. It was like if he were to set it in the Ozarks in Arkansas in 2020, it wouldn't have been the same thing because it would have lost authenticity. So even if you're going to go back and tell a story about where you're from, set it during that time would be my advice.
Oh,
Or
nice. I
it's gonna
love
lack
that.
authenticity.
Yeah, that's great. And also you mentioned, of course, training. Look up Chris Lee's program if you're looking to do that. But
Absolutely,
also, what about folks who, gosh, I have this story to tell, but maybe they have no desire necessarily to become a writer. What are steps that they can get their project made, or is it kind of lost?
Sorry, it's sort of like it's and I'm not a big deal or anything like that, but people frequently approach me and ask me if I have this, have this interesting life story, blah blah blah, and I'm write it. Oh, but I'm not a writer. Well, I'm writing my own stuff, so I'm not gonna stop my tracks and just
So do the work.
You gotta do the work. It's sort of there's no shortcut. It's sort of like, I've had this interesting life and therefore it should be a film or a novel or something like that. You got to tell it, unless you're super rich and you're gonna pay somebody to do it. Like, hey, I'll do it if you throw me like $100 grand. But if you don't have it, then sorry, I'm working on my own stuff.
Yeah, and that's good too. It's easy for people to not know about the work. I mean, everybody here knows about the work.
Yeah, because it's, even just writing or even a good screenplay. I mean, you're talking a year, maybe 2 years, maybe, at shortest, maybe 6 to 9 months of that being your full-time job. And people don't think about that. It's sort of like, oh, can you write this for me? If you're willing to pay me full-time wages for it. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, because it is a full-time job.
And this is, I guess, to all of our writers, have you ever had a script that was authentic to you and then went through, and anyone maybe has information about this or something to say about this, and it's gone through so many edits that it's just completely lost what you truly wanted? And how do you deal with that?
That's actually because it's interesting because it's the people, whoever has been drawn to any of my stuff is probably drawn to it largely because of authenticity. So Chris Lee earlier, he mentioned Wang, which is sort of like the 6 degrees of separation thing. I've actually worked with Wayne on a couple of projects that never got made. Great guy, awesome guy. But with him, it was just sort of like, he's a real filmmaker. So he would never, the last thing he would want is somebody to start layering in things that look like BS or look inauthentic. So most of the people who are interested, actually, the opposite is true. Now, I mean, I've heard horror stories, but I haven't really experienced that. I wonder though, like, I just watched Stowaway, right, with Daniel Day Kim, the sci-fi movie, and this was something. I just wrote a little review about it in midweek, and I missed it on first viewing, but it was brought to my attention that when he's on this spaceship headed towards Mars, and they're all American astronauts, Daniel Day Kim eats his space food with chopsticks. Like that kind of weird, you know what I mean? So it happens, guaranteed.
Yeah.
I don't think it was. He probably had a fork on the first draft, right? And then somebody said, "No,
I'm not an astronaut,
guy.
But don't you eat
but he's
space
like,
food
he's
with your
American.
fingers?
Why are you giving him chopsticks?" Like,
just in case you didn't realize.
But Daniel Day Kim got to use chopsticks. That's crazy.
See, these are some moments where, Do any of our writers?
Movie. I don't want to disparage the movie, but that's
right. Well, not everyone's going to tune in to see that moment.
Yeah.
So
I didn't see it when I first viewed it because I guess I'm in Hawaii, so I see chopsticks all the time. So it's just
I've seen people eat jelly beans with chopsticks. Maybe that makes sense actually, and Cheetos because you keep your fingers clean. So many tips here today at this panel. Susan, do you have any kind of input on that about going through edits and how you kind of navigate through keeping it to your original work as much as possible?
It's tough. It kind of depends on the form, because if you're a playwright, then all the words kind of belong to you. And And if you're a filmmaker, if you're writing a screenplay, then like somebody can just hire you and replace you. Or for TV, it's kind of like a hive mind where we're all trying to sort of serve the showrunner and the show, you know? And so it sort of depends on who's producing it and how much control you have over the project. I will say in the best of situations, it's not about your own ego. It's kind of like, if it's working really well, and I guess I think about it most in terms of theater, it's like in terms of, it's not when the writer isn't always right, or the director isn't always right, or the producer. It's just kind of like everyone needs to put their own ego aside and listen to the play, or listen to what the story is. And I think there's different versions of when you know it the best. It's like they talk about, like if it's a screenplay, then the first version, the screenwriter knows it best. And then by the end of the shoot, maybe the director does. And then at the end of the process, like maybe it's the editor, and there's a progression to it. And just to find, what is this story about, especially if you're the creator, like why does it need to be told, and how do you protect the integrity of it? And I think when people start to get insecure and throw stuff into it, like Groundhog Day is such a fun story, and all of these executives apparently were trying to just create a reason, like, oh, well, he buys a voodoo doll and this and that, and just all these things that really would have like taken away from I think the charm and oddness of the film, because it's, we have to explain it, or we have to cut this scene. When you start to doubt that something's working when it is, I think that's when you get too many cooks, or people get nervous, and then they can ruin it. Because like every really good film that happens is a miracle. I mean, it's so hard to even get it made.
It is a
miracle. And it has to be good. It's really like, it's a testament. It's a feat.
Yeah. Now you have worked, you're working now with Hulu and Amazon, but you've also worked with smaller theaters with your plays. Do you have any advice for maybe a playwright who would like to see their work kind of on a bigger platform, not a bigger platform, but a different platform? Is there steps that you have to take, or is there something that you would recommend?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as being really in line with what Buffy was saying, in terms of acting. I think that, we're all storytellers, and there's a different craft in terms of playwriting or TV or film. There's a different way of structuring, but there's also building up your skills, and becoming better. And so I think that you can get better at dialogue in one form and then switch to the other. It wasn't as big of a transition as I feared, I guess like my advice, I feel like is really just to keep working, keep getting better. It's that thing of like, you keep working until you can't be denied anymore, but it's not to be intimidated. I think it's some of the things that have already been said so eloquently in terms of like finding your authentic voice and the story that you want to tell, and believing that you do have a, just like a powerful story to tell, and figure out how to do it. Chris Mckinney, I was laughing because that whole thing of like, oh, I have a story, can you write it for me? I think that I also hear a lot is someone will come up to me and say, oh, I have a great idea, I just have to write it. I'm like, okay, like that's the entire thing. Like, and there's also that, like, there's only so many stories. It's really in the telling. It's really in the craft. Like there's no hiding behind bad writing, or I don't think that you can. So you just have to, it's like, it's very frustrating. And I think anyone can write, but also it's hard, like it's a frustrating process. But then when you can figure something out, it feels so good when you sort of like unlock something in a script, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this next draft felt so much better in one way or another.
Yeah. And you say something that really stood out to me is ego. I think especially when we're telling our personal stories, our authentic stories, and we haven't had this opportunity before, we hold on to them, and we can't see them in any other way. So to be open to, like we said, be open to notes and to moments, then I think that's really good. And I do love hearing, again, laughing about Chris being approached by everybody. So everyone out there, do not contact these people and ask them to write your stuff unless you have $100,000. Ding.
At least.
Yes. Sorry, that's his starting point. So I want to open it up. I don't want to call out anyone to give an answer during a specific time, but I kind of want to ask general questions, because I do want to empower our community now, right? Not just locally here in Hawaii, but folks that may be watching anywhere in the world or in the country. So what are some things to start now, whether they're a producer or a writer or an actor or a director? What are some pieces that people can log off of this Zoom or this webinar and do something today or start to plan today? What would you say is something that we could do?
Well, my thought is always, the difference between somebody achieving a goal is that they did it.
Yes.
They actually started to write a script or started to take acting classes, or, instead of sitting back and waiting for life to happen to you, you've got to create your own life in this business. So I just say the difference is doing.
Yeah, and we talked about $100,000, but Amy and I actually started a writing group because we were like, we just want to write more. That cost us $0, So yeah, just get together and start.
Zero.
Except for maybe chips that you have to bring to the table when we're writing.
Absolutely, yeah. So and I guess what I would add to that is, and whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a writer or whatever, it's sort of like if you can help yourself, don't do it. Only do it if you can't help yourself. You know what I mean? It's a compulsion. It's like if you're an actor, it's like you need to act. Doesn't matter if you're doing it, whatever, every day or half, I know that there's gaps between projects and stuff. You can't help yourself. You're an actor. You want to be an actor. You're a writer. You want to be a writer. You're a director. If you can help yourself, don't do it, because you're not going to do it. It's just sort of like, it's basically because it's not easy. You know what I mean? So
I wish I wanted to be a dentist, to be honest.
Yeah.
Listen, if I wanted to be a dentist, I would be a dentist.
Well,
absolutely. Same here.
Well, I think, in many ways, I, as an actor, I was always frustrated. Well, because I was at the Asian American Theater Company, we created our own stories and we wrote and we did everything. We did all of it. But I did have a story that I needed to get out of me. And, opportunity came for me. They said, we heard you have a solo show. And I said, yes, I do, but I didn't. But because of all the things that I've done, like sketch comedy and working with other, playwrights that were coming up, I was able to craft my own show like in 90 days.
Yes.
And it became a huge hit and went everywhere. But when I was doing it, I was only doing it because I had a story I needed to tell and I just had to get it out. And I had people, though, to help me. I had a dramaturg, I had a director, I had, I'd been in theater for a long time, so I knew how to make it entertaining. But it was the first time I'd written something. And the terror of actually writing, being judged as an actor, as a writer, and my own life, I thought, what if nobody comes? Oh, well, at least I know I have created this for myself.
Yeah.
I'm telling my story. And it was, incredibly successful, which then led to many, many other things. That helped me. That opened doors to television and film and more theater stuff. And because I'd done theater, it toured all across the country to different theaters because people were like, I guess, hungry. And it was also a time when solo performances were big. Early 90s.
But giving yourself a deadline, right? I love that you,
but
what are the 90s? But giving yourself a deadline, right?
They said, we're doing this thing in August. And this is before, real internet stuff. So I was talking to them and they said, do you have a script? And I said, oh, it's in LA, because I was interpreting on a film. I speak Japanese. I was interpreting on a film in Monterey, a Japanese American co-production, which was hell. And I remember the desperation of not wanting to do that ever again. Although I learned a lot about filmmaking.
There you go.
I never wanted to do it. And they just said, I said, yes, I have it. Yeah, I have it, but it's in LA. I can't send it to you. And then I just got busy writing,
Mm-hmm.
and it turned out okay.
Turned out great.
But it's just, I just remember standing in the mud in Monterey saying, as God is my witness, I'm never doing this again. I'm not going to stand in the mud. I'm going to tell my stories. I'm going to do what I want to do. And who knows if you're going to make any money, but you follow your passion, man, and tell your story, and it works out.
Yeah. Anyone else have some action that we can take, advice?
I agree with Amy with the, oh, sorry, did I?
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
I don't know. I was gonna say, like, goal setting is really important. I used to try to write a play once a year because that was when I would apply to O'Neill, Sundance, all the different programs. So I feel like step one, depending on where you are in your journey, is like just to do it and set those goals. I think it's sort of a couple of different things. Like, I think that the most important thing is just becoming better at your craft. I mean, really, like, that's the most important thing. Don't get too caught up in like the business. Like, you've been doing something for like a couple of months and then you're looking for an agent, it's just like, don't worry about it. Like, that'll come. Like, you get one when you need one. Like, they just turn up when you need one,
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that, find your collaborators, find the people that you trust, where you can send them the piece of writing, or will help you, or you can build something together. Like, I think a community like this room, is a testament to that, of just finding people that you want to work with is so important. And I think this is especially a Hawaii thing, is just that, it feels so remote, right? Like, I am intimidated by this, and there's a lot of power in like, well, what are your connections? Like, can somebody like introduce, like, I was so intimidated to meet Chris Lee for like years. I could have like cold emailed Chris Lee, and I waited, like 10 years until David introduced us, because I was like, oh, well, I don't want to bother. And I think that fear, that sort of like that politeness, like, I'm not going to do that, could hold you back. And like other people, like aren't doing that. They're sending the emails. They're cold.
Yeah, that's part of our culture too. That's not just the Hawaii thing. It's an AAPI thing, right? Where we're just like, oh, so I mean, like, look at four-way stops in Hawaii. Come on, like, we can't even like, deal with that. So yeah. So I love that. Just do it, right?
Yeah, my friend manifested a really great job, and he sort of graduated from an MFA program, and he kind of like ask people like, who should I write to? What should you? He sort of cold emailed like 300 people, and asked like, can I meet with them? And then maybe out of that 300, like 120 replied, and then he Zoomed with like, I don't know, like 70 of them. And he was like, the worst thing that happens is just somebody doesn't answer your email. And if it works out well, you've built a contact, maybe a friend, maybe it leads to nothing, but it's just like, all it takes is just a polite, respectful email, and maybe somebody will respond to it. Like, maybe it'll lead to something. And you can do that from Hawaii or wherever you are in the world, right?
Yeah, and I actually want to throw it to Buffy, because, I was really excited to have you on this panel, because I feel like you're such a great representation of our local theater community. And I said this at the top of the panel, but I see so many local actors, and when I say local, I mean native Hawaiian actors who are, I don't want to use the word shy to get out there, but they just don't feel like there's a place. What's something, if there are, and I think that there are some local actors watching now who want to, start building their career a little bit more, what's something that they can do right after this Zoom? What's your piece of advice? What's a piece of action that they can do to get started?
Sure. First off, I'm very intimidated by this panel in itself. And when I first got the initial invite, I was like, you sure you got the right person?
Yes, like, we wanted you here.
Like, I feel like the newbie amongst this panel. So, but I'll tell you one thing, Hawaiians, we're not shy. We're not shy people. We're just a little modest, and we kind of tend to keep to ourselves and in our little bubbles and such. But I think it's because kind of going back to the box thing, because we feel like there's not enough characters out there that look like us. There aren't a lot of characters that are written for people who look like me. Therefore, we shy away from a lot of that. A lot of my personal background is in musical theater. I started in musical theaters from, I think I must have been 13. And then I was only doing musical theaters. And then only in 2016 did I jump back into the straight plays, as you would call it. And discovering a place where they did write about people that look like me.
Are you talking about Kumu Theater?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great place. Yeah.
It is. And then from there, the world kind of opened up a little bit more to me and made me, and I was introduced to other people. There are other people out in the theater world, and even in the film world, that are actually actively seeking people who look like me, who look like, whether you're Polynesian, Micronesian, Melanesian, Asian in general, there are people writing for people who look like you.
Right here, boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is, for me, I think all you need to do is just be open-minded about it. Be present, be here now, and
know that there's a space, right?
Exactly.
There are people
there
looking
are
for
spaces.
you.
Exactly. There are people who are looking for you. You just have to keep yourself open. And like Amy had said, don't just sit on your okole and do nothing. You have to get out there. Put yourself out there, whether it's doing a play or, auditioning for films or, whatever it is, or you're just a representation on social media, put yourself out there and don't be afraid of what people, because there are going to be the typical trolls and the haters and such. I put myself, on my times off of not doing shows, because I'm not a full-time actor. I work I work a 9-to-5 job, in retail, but it allows me to do what I love to do. But in the meantime of not doing shows, I do TikToks. And I do stupid things like that puts my name
but that keeps you warm, but it also keeps you warm,
Exactly.
and it's as silly as it seems. I think that's a great piece of advice. If you are, because a lot of Hawaii actors are not full-time actors, and hopefully that'll change with all of these productions that the folks here are working on, the productions that Chris has also mentioned, that will change. I think we're moving that way, but to keep yourself warm, right? And to also see yourself as a creative, even if it's not your full-time gig yet, that you are one right now.
Yes.
And I love that. And thank you for being here. You are a rock star, and you were wonderful on Magnum. And I'm excited to see what happens for your career, because I just think it's going to be wonderful. Any other pieces of advice that anyone wants to offer? If not, I'll throw another question. Okay, I'm going to throw another question out of my imaginary box, my hat. See my object work, Amy? We do improv. All right, this question says, if tomorrow you could do anything you want, either for yourself or for the community, what would it be? What do you want to see happen? Boom, tomorrow, it happened. What do you want to see? For yourself or the community or your friend? It's a big question.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I have an answer.
No, let's get an answer.
I feel like, there's no shortage of creativity. I think, as this group clearly indicates. I think that what's weak is, how would I say it? Media outlets, publicity. If you're working on independent stuff, it's that's where I feel like that's where we lack representation, or we lack power. So we can create something, but what else can one do other than put it out on social media? Where are the outlets? Like, for example, even if you just look at Hawaii, right? Who runs the Star Advertiser? Who runs Honolulu Magazine? Not us. You know what I'm saying? So it's just I feel like I feel like we need that arm. And some things are happening now. For example, a friend of mine is putting together something called the Hawaii Review of Books, and he'll a website that'll review not just writing, but multimedia stuff, film, and all of that. But I think we need more of that.
I love that. Yeah.
Or at least more of a presence in those positions of power.
Yeah. And if anyone out there, or I'm sure a lot of people out there agrees, write to these places, or start to apply to these places. And again, I go back to what our culture is used to, of not feeling like we have a place or we're not good enough. But yeah, we are more than good enough, especially here in Hawaii, and just go out and do it. And yeah, that's a great thing to touch on, about other spaces that support the creative community,
Yeah. So I do a column almost once a week on midweek. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, because I don't think anybody under the age of 60
not Rotten Tomatoes. What is it?
Rotten Papayas.
Rotten Papayas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't. It's not like I make money doing it. But one of the benefits of doing it is that I get to review kind of whatever I want. So I've been doing it for like a year, and I've done stuff on 12 different things that have connections to Hawaii. For example, a film that Ty produced, a documentary, and see that I feel like we need more of that. So even during, let's say, my creative downtime, I feel like a lot of us could maybe be doing more of that kind of stuff on the publicity side. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And also, kind of going into supporting each other, supporting these, because this group knows what's going on, right? And I guess for you, Chris Lee, does money talks, right? So if a show is out there, a movie is out there, do box office sales and like hype still really matter? And if you don't have $100,000 to start off with to throw at a production or a movie or something that you are passionate about, what are all levels, I guess? What are different ways that we can get these projects out there even more? I hope that made sense. I talked a lot too.
So I'm going to take a little contrarian view here, because one of the things that, especially since we started the program at West Oahu, which started after all of the changes in production and distribution. When we started the Manoa program, there was no social media, there was no smartphones, there was no YouTube. I was going to use Friendster to get the kids to talk to each other.
Yes.
But there was, but most especially there was no smartphone, and there was no Instagram, certainly no Snapchat. The kids out there are delivering in TikToks. So I think if Buffy's doing TikToks, I think that's great. The reality is that there are so many free platforms available that all you have to do is create something compelling. It doesn't have to cost $100,000. Probably the biggest single star out of Hawaii right now is this kid, Bretman Rock, who I think is maybe just turned 21 recently, who basically out of his kitchen in Eva Beach created, turned himself into a media superstar on all platforms. And he did it by just being very authentic. I mean, I've been wanting to have him come to this campus for a long time, but the campus is always like, no, he uses too much swear words and stuff like that. So
he's being authentic.
You may not like his programming, but when he puts out a video on YouTube, or now he has his own show on MTV and everything, I mean, there are 2 million views like within 48 hours. So, and so what we tell the students is, there's nothing holding you back. You can shoot an entire movie on iPhone, and they've been done, and they've come out in Sundance and everything to great acclaim. And there's nothing stopping you from getting your material out there because of YouTube and all these other platforms that are out there, But you have to make something compelling. You have to make something that people want to watch. And that's the secret sauce, So to the earlier question that we were sort of discussing, it's basically just go do the work. And there are so many outlets for doing the work. There's so many great theater places here in Hawaii that, go work at MVT or go work at Diamond Head Theater. I was in theater when I was a kid. And I would also say this, one of the things that really influenced me when I finally made it to Hollywood, and I was very often pitching Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to be the leads in films that I was working on, is that I grew up watching an all Asian cast of Oklahoma at the Blaisdell. I think Getty Watanabe has that routine where he sings Yokohama to the sound of to the track from Oklahoma, as a comedy. But I grew up, but I saw that show, and there was a few Hollies in the show, but it was mostly local folks that were in the show,
Yeah,
right?
That's the theater I grew up with.
It was Scott's father, it was Herb Rogers Productions. There in the summer, they would bring in all these summer stock shows from Broadway and stuff, and so one of the things that influenced me is I never grew up in a society where I didn't see people who look like us, who were in all aspects of life. There was no shortage of politicians, there was no shortage of business people, and there was no shortage of, and as far as I was concerned, what I was seeing in theater and stuff, not necessarily in national television and movies, but locally, is they were casting locally. So, and Chris's grandfather is a great example of that, and all the talent. I'm a huge fan of 24 Hour Dance Squad. I'm a huge and you think about that girl from Waipa who does all the choreography for BTS and is in the videos. So there's no, we don't have to get into Bruno Mars, but there's no bigger star than Bruno Mars.
A whole nother panel. That's the Bruno Mars panel is happening right after this. Yeah.
So yeah, I just think. And what he was like a Michael Jackson impersonator and an Elvis impersonator.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
He was like this big.
Yeah, he was like that big,
It was
right?
amazing.
So, yeah, just go do the work.
Do the work.
There's no shortage of people looking for great talent. And I think it's a misnomer to think that they're not. It is also, I'm very familiar with lots of people who did send out 300 cold emails, or in the old days, cold calls, and we're lucky to, meet with like a few people. But it does work sometimes, And so I think you have to do that. You have to believe in yourself. But you also have to recognize that you may not be that good at first. Not everybody's born this creative genius like David Henry Wang, who was writing FOB and Dancing the Railroad when he was at Stanford, right? Right, Susan? So, not everybody's Mozart, and that's okay. But,
yes, that is okay.
but
Thank you.
But there are so many very talented people, and I think the big news for me is not so much that we're seeing so many more people in front of the camera like we are now. I get excited when I see all the Asian American Pacific Islander showrunners. That is really where the power lies, because there's a reason they call them showrunners. It's like that. It's so. Anyways, yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah. So I think again, having representation all over the place, and Chris, you started such a fantastic program to elevate local creatives and elevate these stories and these faces. And this has been such a wonderful, wonderful panel. I want to open it up to everyone to see if there's anything else that you'd like to leave us with, because I know we touched on certain things and about with your background, but is there anything at all that you'd like to leave our audience with today? Please go for it. Anyone?
Someone asked a question about how you make that journey, and they mentioned Chris Bright and myself, and I'd rather hear from Chris, because I know, I left college and stuff like that, and I will be very honest, when I graduated from college, I was the only person I knew in my class who wasn't going to medical school or law school or been recruited to the Procter and Gamble or the CIA or something, and I spent the entire summer in New York, literally pounding the pavement, trying to get any interview that I could. And finally, after 6 or 7 interviews at ABC, I got, a PA job at Good Morning America, because nobody recruits for this business. Nobody comes looking for you. You have to go.
Unless you're Buffy and Magnum PI and knocks on your door.
Well, she's Mozart. So, it's like that is just a reality. But I'm actually, I know how brilliant Chris Bright is as a writer, because I read his stuff. I'm really curious to hear how he made the leap across the Pacific, but I guess it started at Chapman. Was that it, what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
Sorry,
Chris, the question is, as a young person raised in a small community yourself, how can other aspiring young local creators prepare themselves to reach and be taken seriously by established, influential decision makers?
What a question. Oh my gosh.
Can you see who it came from?
No, who
I'll
is
tell
it?
you later.
Oh, I'd say. Yeah, I can only really speak about my experience. I'll just try to keep it as short as possible. I went, as Chris was talking about, I had a grandfather who was in musical theater. I did that
Ron
for
Bright.
most of,
Ron
yes.
Bright. I'm a bright kid.
And and so I was surrounded by the arts my whole life and knew that I wanted to go in some way. Went to school originally in music, then actually ended up switching to film halfway through. I did exactly what many people were talking about. I just cold called a lot of people to try to get a job. Eventually was lucky enough to get a job at Disney Animation, and worked there for 3 years. And then this kind of answers your question earlier of like what advice I would give. I had this wonderful job. I probably could have stayed there for the rest of my life, but I decided to just take a risk and really felt like I was led to write and do that full time. And so I quit my job, went home to Hawaii. Like Ty was saying, I came back home, wanted to get back into the community again, and started writing again. It was only that because I did that, I was able to finish some of the scripts that I was doing, and then which was Conviction, had the right people that we knew, which was the Candell brothers, who came on as producers, and they helped to really get it pushed through. So
Also
it
from
was
Hawaii.
a combination. Yes, also from Hawaii, Okalani grads. It was a combination of just knowing the right people, being in the right place at the right time, and then also hard work. But I will say to anyone out there who wants to take it to the next level, like I said earlier, there is such a tremendous appetite for stories like this. Really, I mean, they're looking for anybody, and they happen. No, really, from Hawaii, they're looking for and right now they think there's only a limited amount of people. I think that's the problem, is they keep coming to, maybe not me, but certainly possibly me, the Candell brothers, that, probably Susan, I'm sure, has heard every single Hawaii story ever. And that's because they just don't know that there's such a tremendous amount of talent in Hawaii. So I would just say, take that risk. Like, really put yourself out there.
Yes.
It's absolutely worth it. If we don't tell those stories, who else will? So
yes, I love that. That is so true. And anyone out there who is watching, please start now. Right? This is an entire panel of rock stars who have done the work, who are here now to inspire you. And I really, really hope that everyone watching takes a moment and realizes your value and realizes how important your voice and your story is. And we all want to hear it. We've heard it many, many times. People are out there looking for you. We have space. I'm getting emotional just saying it. We have a place. It is not a moment. It's a movement. Let's do this. It's Saturday. Don't take the day off. Write down something that maybe you'll do on Monday. But I want to thank our wonderful, wonderful panelists, and thank you to Creative Lab. Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh, this was really, really wonderful. Please look all of them up. They have projects happening. Maybe they're looking for you. Maybe you can collaborate. There's something to do. Again, there's no shortage of creativity and support, especially here in our Hawaii community. Let's start jamming. Yes? How's that sound? Yeah, let's do it. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.